Hello and welcome to TEDxSFIT Virtual Series Day 3. Third time's a charm, ain't it? Good evening to all our lovely audiences and a warm welcome to our international viewers joining us. TEDxSFIT has now gone global. So if you're feeling sleepy क्योंकि ठंडी का मौसम है, बारिश का महीना है, तो जागो लोगो जागो. You wouldn't want to miss this. I hope you all are in high spirits today because it's going to be jam packed with a lot of speakers and fun performances. I'm your host, Delicia Fernandez, along with my co host, Mervin DeCosta. Hi, Mervin.
Hi, Jalesia.
So, a lot has happened over a week, but here at TEDxSFIT, we want you to take a break, wind down, a little dopamine rush, don't hurt nobody. But before we begin with day 3, I want to ask you a very, very serious question. Is your room clean or dirty right now? I'm going to turn around and ask my co-host Mervin, is your room clean or dirty right now?
From what I'm seeing, it looks pretty clean to me. But as you can see, my vision is a bit impaired. How are you?
Well, I am a very organized person. Now, who am I kidding? My room is a complete mess. I've lost sight of my bed last week.
Nice one. We want to thank our college director, Brother Jose Tirithil, our deputy director, Brother Vijay Kumar, our principal, Dr. Cincy George, all the heads of departments and deans, our training and placement officer, Mr. Wilson Pinto, and of course, St. Francis Institute of Technology for being that pillar of support for pushing the students for our greater good. We want to thank TEDx for providing us these opportunities to share our experiences and ideas because ideas are always worth spreading. And a thank you would definitely fall short of expressing our gratitude for your presence here today, our lovely audience. We hope we make your day brighter and a little bit lighter. We all could use a little smile once in a while. Am I right?
And on that note, thanking our also generous sponsors, TEDx Society 2020 is brought to you by our presenting partner, Yockit Learn Abroad, providing online consultation to students pursuing higher education and career services. Our gifting partner, The Source Store, a brand that retails clothing and accessories online. Our knowledge partner, Shrek Learning, providing premium courses online by professionals. And our associate partner, Shastra Ventures, providing mentoring and funding to startups. Okay, so we have a lot of goodies waiting for you, so stay here to the end to find out.
And now, talking about our theme. Our brain picks up so many things that we don't comprehend necessarily on a daily basis. And it is those senses of perception, sound, touch that work much more on a deeper level than we can comprehend. And it is talks like the ones we have today that give you a sense of understanding about why we think like we do. But today, the kind of things humans learn are really focused on survival. We use our memory to learn, let's say, some new languages, 11-step face wash routine, some Shashi Tharoor level vocabulary words, and maybe some facts about Star Wars. Am I right?
Well, we all have those memories, and some can be good, some can be bad, and not all of them would be defining for sure. Like that advertisement jingle that's stuck in your head that you only remember when you're giving your exam or when your mom is scolding you. And you remember that joke that you heard last week? I know. It's those minion like beings in our head, neurons, that do all this hard work in connecting one memory to another. Now, during in this period of quarantine, we've been missing out on a few things for sure. But all these minions are back to work. So get back your train of thought because we're in for a ride.
Now, speaking about today's schedule briefly, we have three unbelievably great speakers, two musical band performances to elevate our senses, and a Q&A session in the end where you can connect with the speakers yourself. So if at any point you have any question for us, feel free to drop them down in the chat box below to our moderator for today, Chelsea D'Souza. And remember, there are no right or wrong questions. So our lovely speakers will definitely answer all of them right in the end. So we hope to have you on board.
And to have the best virtual TEDx experience, please switch to speaker view by clicking on the button on the top right corner of your window. Kindly note, we all are here for a positive and enriching experience, and we do not want any hindrance in this exchange. So, if someone is detected to be sending offensive, hateful, or spam messages, they will be immediately removed from this session. Now, moving ahead, we have another poll for you. What sound do you wake up to in the morning? I'm going to ask our moderator, Chelsea. Chelsea, what sound do you wake up to in the morning? Okay, Chelsea, clearly technical errors only happen at this point.
Hello, am I audible?
Hi. Yes.
Finally, they unmuted me because I talk a lot. I think they've just put me on mute. Well, I genuinely can wake up with a default alarm ringtone like 36% of us here.
Okay,
Yeah, my friend.
wow.
Yeah.
Why am I the only person who wakes up with my mom scolding? Okay, thank you, Chelsea. Thank you so much, Mervin.
And now for our first speaker today, a Kiwi Indian by nationality, but a global citizen at heart, an associate professor in audiology from London, with an internationally recognized and an award winning academic, mentor, keynote speaker, and scientist. He has a PhD in clinical audiology from the University of Auckland, which comprehends his ever increasing international reputation, whether it be for research and findings. But it is not these accolades that define him. He is a passionate teacher, a reflective speaker, an innovative mentor, focused on using technology and innovation in creating meaningful learning spaces. A heart of gold, or should I say, a man that practices and preaches kindness to the world through his life and his YouTube channel. So now I call upon Doctor by Day, YouTuber by Night, Dr. Raj Shekhawat, to speak on his talk titled Tears of Joy, the Magic of Hearing.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Raj Shekhawat. I'm a clinical audiologist by training. In the past decade and a half, I have worked in countries like India, United States of America, Singapore, New Zealand, England, and very soon Australia. Based on my experience working in schools, clinics, hospitals, universities, private practice, there's one thing I have noticed worldwide, and that is people tend to underestimate the significance of hearing. Hearing impairment is invisible in nature. Unlike visual impairment or person with physical impairment, if there are two people standing and one of them has hearing loss, there is absolutely no way, purely by looking at them, we can predict who has hearing impairment. The very fact that I'm talking to you, the very fact that I can speak in 5 different languages is purely because of my hearing. When a child is born, based on their hearing ability, they hear a lot. And based on that, they learn to speak and they learn a language. Not only speech and language development, all the other spheres of our lives are also dependent on our hearing. The moment we get up from the bed using an alarm, hearing dependent. We get up and we go to work, our commute, hearing dependent. Our work life, interacting with colleagues, hearing dependent. Education, attending lectures, interacting with peers, hearing dependent. Entertainment, watching movies and watching TV and listening to music, hearing dependent. Hearing is extremely important, and everything around us depends on hearing. In fact, hearing can heighten our emotional encounters too. Let me share this very recent encounter of mine with you all. One of the most strongest emotions I have ever experienced in my life was tears of joy. As they say in Hindi, khushi ke aansu. 2 months back, precisely on 30th of June, 9:13 night, my wife went into labor. We rushed to the hospital, and after intensive 12 hours of labor, 9:29 in the morning on 1st of July, our son George Yashraj was born. I can very vividly remember his head crowning, then his beautiful face coming, and then the whole body. And then he cried. Oh boy, tears went rolling down my cheeks. It's so amazing that a cry of a newborn is capable of evoking such strong emotions in us. However, when I put my audiologist hat on, I can probably understand why that happens to us. Basically, the auditory area and the emotional area in our brain, the part of our brain which processes sounds and the part of the brain which processes emotions are linked together. And that is why when we hear a nice, soothing favorite song of ours, we instantly feel relaxed and calm. Contrary to that, if we hear a sound of an ambulance or a police siren, it evokes distressing feelings. That's because the emotions and hearing, they are connected to each other. To understand this, let's do an activity together. I want you all to close your eyes. Go ahead, close your eyes with me. Now, I want you to think about the most exciting day of your life till today. Relive that day in your mind. Go through that day. That could be your day of your wedding, the day your child was born, you won some award, you got some good news, or your time with your loved one. Just keep replaying that moment, that day, those conversations in your mind. It's beautiful, isn't it? Now, I want you to keep your eyes closed, but this time, you are again replaying that very same incidents, but there's a catch. And the catch is, this time, you can't hear anything at all. You can't hear any conversations, any sounds. Let it sink in. Go back, replay that day, but this time you can't hear a thing. What do you think? Do you think your day was as exciting as it was when you could hear everything? I would leave you to answer that question to yourself. That signifies the importance of hearing in our lives. Let's talk about our magical hearing. Hearing is one of the first sensory organs to develop. In fact, during the very first trimester of pregnancy, hearing starts developing. By the time the little baby is 16 weeks old in the mother's womb, the baby can detect the sound. And by the time the baby is 24 weeks old, the baby can sort of start turning their heads towards the source of the sound. Sound is everywhere in the environment. When a sound is created, there are vibrations which are created. There are sound waves which are created in the environment. And when those sound waves travel towards our head, this part here, we call it pinna. The purpose of this part is to filter, to act as a funnel, to receive the sounds, and then direct the sounds to our ear canal. When sound waves pass through the ear canal, they reach our eardrum and they impinge on the eardrum. As a result of that, the eardrum vibrates. And there are 3 very tiny bones which are attached to our eardrum on one side, and on the other side, they're attached to this snail-shaped spiral structure called cochlea, which is filled with salty water. Now, that's the part where real magic happens. Almost on the size of our thumb, there are thousands of hair cells in the cochlea, which converts the vibration energy of sounds into electrical impulses. And then these electrical impulses are carried by a nerve, auditory nerve, all the way to human brain where the sounds are processed. Let's understand the importance of these hair cells in our cochlea. Although they are magical and they do this very significant part of converting the sound impulses into electrical impulses, they are also very delicate and prone to damage. And once they are damaged, there's absolutely no way we could regenerate them in humans. So they are very, very precious. Let me show you something. These are various colorful pipe cleaners, beautiful, colorful ones. They represent our hair cells, okay? And my hand here, it represents the sound level or the sound waves. Now see carefully, the sound waves are coming and they hit the hair cells, and the hair cells are processing those sounds and they're converting them into electrical impulses, which then go to the brain, okay? When the sound level is mild to moderate, the hair cells are fine, they are dancing around, they look healthy, they look fine. However, imagine the sound levels are really, really loud. Let's see what happens then. Watch carefully. Loud sound level comes and goes like bang, 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 bang. See what has happened to our hair cells. Let's try and bring them back to where they were. No. Once damage, damage for good. Damage forever. This is extremely, extremely important. And us, on the name of entertainment, we expose ourselves to very, very loud noises and loud sounds. Let me give you an example. The other day I was traveling to work and I was taking a train to my work, going to central London. Few meters away, there was a lad, young lad, sitting with earphones in his ears and blasting the music. Me sitting a few meters away could literally hear everything. I could hear the song, I could hear the beats, I could hear the lyrics. When we are putting these earbuds or headphones and blasting the music, remember, we are putting the noise source very, very close to our eardrums and then putting our hair cells on risk. Research shows that the amount of noise level by which we can be exposed to and the safety duration for how long it's safe for us to be exposed to that duration. And that research shows that when the sound intensity is around 85 decibel, we could be safely exposed to that sound levels for 8 hours. That sounds like a long time, isn't it? However, listen to this very carefully. Every time the sound intensity increases by just 3 decibel, the safety duration reduces to half, which means if the sound intensity increases from 85 to 88 decibel, the safety duration reduces from 8 hours to 4 hours. And if we do our maths, by the time the sound levels are 115 decibel, the safety duration of exposure is only 30 seconds. I want you to reflect on the times when we go to nightclubs and parties and functions and work. The noise levels around us, how loud are those? And is it safe for us to be exposed to those levels? Next time you're exposing yourself to loud noise, I would want you all to think about these hair cells. That's exactly what's going to happen to our hair cells. So it's extremely, extremely important to be very careful and looking after our hearing. Unlike a child who is born with a permanent hearing loss, there's nothing much we can do as such. We can only identify that hearing loss as early as possible by doing a newborn hearing screening. That could happen on the day one the child is born, and we can detect the hearing loss, and that we can put a management plan in place ASAP. Contrary to that, the noise level which are there in our environment, and if we get a hearing loss because of them, that's a purely acquired hearing loss. the hearing loss, which can be 100% preventable. Research shows that there are 5.2 million people under the age of 19 years, and there are 26 million people above the age of 19 years who develop hearing loss because of exposure to noise. Permanent hearing loss, which can be 100% preventable. So, what is the solution? Well, the solution is I have created this very cool acronym called APP, APP, apps as in the apps which we use in day-to-day lives. Now, what does that app stands for? A stands for awareness and attitude. It's extremely important for all of us to be aware about the dangerous impact of noise and sounds on our hearing. There are a lot of people who are not even aware that unknowingly they are exposing themselves to dangerous levels of noise, and it can lead to permanent hearing loss. So a talk like this is a tiny attempt to create that awareness. Once we have that awareness, there can be a positive shift in our attitude that we don't necessarily have to expose ourselves to very loud sounds on the name of entertainment. P stands for prevention. Now, there are two things we can do in terms of prevention. First, reduce the level of sound if we can. For example, if we are listening through loud music through our headphones using our phone, we have absolute authority to reduce the loudness level, isn't it? Second, if we can't reduce the loudness, for example, if you've gone to a place where the music is playing and it's beyond our control, what we can then do is move away from the sound source. As we move away from the sound source, the intensity of sound by which we are exposing ourselves goes down. And that way, we can save our hearing. Third, and the most important thing, is protection. What do we mean by protection? I'm sure you must have seen all these music sensations like Sam Smith and Taylor Swift and Ariana Grande and Bruno Mars. Whenever they are doing live performances, they always wear musicians' plug in their ears. And what those plugs do is they not only help them get a feedback on their singing, but they also help to attenuate or reduce the noise exposure and save their hearing. So it's extremely important for us as well that if we are going to a very loud concert or if you're going to a party which is going to be super duper loud, please make sure there are some measures in place to use hearing protections which can protect your hearing. I grew up listening to this beautiful story of Aladdin. Aladdin, the magical lamp, the genie. We all know that magical lamp, you rub it, a genie will appear. And then the genie will fulfill 3 wishes. Exactly the same way, we all have a magical lamp with us. And that magical lamp is our hearing system. If we rub it in a wrong way, the genie will die. And once the genie will die, all the magic of hearing, the fact that we can hear birds chirping, the fact that we can hear rustling of leaves, we can hear the voices of our loved ones, we can hear our newborn baby cry, which will evoke tears of joy. All that magic around us will disappear in no time. So it's extremely important to save our hearing. So please be aware, protect, and prevent noise-induced hearing loss. Don't let the genie die. Don't let the magic of hearing disappear from your lives. Thank you so much.
Wow. Let's have a round of applause for Dr. Raj. Yes. Wow. I mean, who would think that the sense of hearing is so vital in our lives? For one, it's a sense that me and so many others take for granted. Hearing sure is a blessing. It's our bread and butter. And if speaking is silver, then listening is gold. For an engineer like me, I only thought apps were available on mobile devices. But after this talk, I'm apparently wrong. So, Dr. Shekhawat, I will surely put your advice on app to use. Thank you so much for joining us today.
And we promise the music to your ears, and we keep our promises, calling upon an all-night boys band from Vasai on its musical voyage with a million dreams, the Pacifiers.
ओ माई मेरी तू मेरी ज़मीं तेरे खातिर हम यूज़र बस है ज़हनों में रहे तेरा नाम सदा चाहे आस मेरी ये रहे न रहे ओ वतन मेरे इस मिट्टी में मैंने अपना खून बहाया था कुर्बान हुआ तेरी असमत पे मैं कितना नसीबों वाला था तेरी मिट्टी में मिल जावा गुल बन के मैं खिल जावा इतनी सी है दिल की आरज़ू तेरे नदियों में बह जावा तेरे फसलों में लहरावा इतनी सी है दिल की आरज़ू वंदे मातरम वंदे मातरम वंदे मातरम वंदे मातरम है मेरी ज़मीं अफसोस नहीं जो तेरे लिए सो दर्द सहे महफूज रहे तेरी आन सदा चाहे जान मेरी ये रहे न रहे वंदे मातरम है मेरी ज़मीं महबूब मेरी मेरी नस नस में तेरा इश्क बहे फीका न पड़े कभी रंग तेरा जिस मुंह से निकल के खून कहे वंदे मातरम 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 वंदे मातरम
Beautiful performance, indeed, you guys. You did more than just pacifiers. You really have made our evening a bit more brighter, a bit more better already. So thank you so much, pacifiers.
And before we go ahead with our next speaker, we want to ask you another question. What is teaching to all of you? Mervin, what is teaching to you?
For me is, in terms speaking of an engineer, real world examples. That's it. How about you?
Yeah, I think for us it's more real world examples for sure. being engineers, we have to. And for everybody else, that if it's some other option, then I think our next speaker would be the right person to answer this question. And as you know, it is said that a good teacher is like a candle, consuming itself to light the way for others. And our next speaker coming up is definitely a great teacher, but also an entrepreneur at Tej, the education journey. To teach is like to touch a life forever. An upcoming speaker being the best teacher of the year in Maharashtra, having had research and review papers published in international journals and a freelance journalist with the Times Group, he decided to take a transition and change his course to pursue his one true passion, teaching, to help students to achieve their dreams without any borders. A teacher can truly change the world, and in his words, his teaching is both his avocation and vocation. And he believes that education can be used as a tool for empowering the mind. A man who has worn many hats and excelled in all of them, presenting to you a teacher by choice and a poet by chance, Mr. Tejas Shyam.
Since childhood, I've often been enamored by displays of extraordinary memory by people who seem to be no different than you and I. I'm sure all of you have probably felt the same way on many an occasion. After all, doesn't it make us wonder how someone can be so great at learning things while we face a constant struggle? Today, I'm going to let you in on a secret, one that can change your life. It certainly changed mine. I'm going to tell you about a simple method which will help you learn anything super quick. Yes, that's right. We're going to unravel the secrets to being an efficiently quick learner. Now, before I begin, I must tell you that while the method in itself is quite systematic in its approach and effective in its outcomes, adopting and adapting this method to your life is going to take a little practice. But once you're there, it's going to make learning even complicated things reasonably simple and as quick as can be. So now let's get straight to it. The methodology I've developed for myself over the years is quite literally called SIMPLE, SIMPLE, an acronym. It really is just that. 6 baby steps that can help you supercharge your brain to accomplish remarkable feats of learning. So when I was an engineering student at IIT Bombay pursuing my dual degree, I had to submit a master's project thesis. And for any of you familiar with the process, the first step in the research journey involves literature survey, reading an extensive set of research articles on your chosen area of work written by other researchers. The process can get really intimidating. There is so much to read and such limited time. And that's when the first step of this method actually rescued me big time. The first step is S, sensory involvement. That is seeing, speaking, writing, touching, and hearing. So basically, what you do is that you involve as many senses as possible in the process of immersing yourself in learning. That way, if one sense feels exhausted, the others help balance the load of learning, and together the process becomes much less fatiguing and much faster. Now, what I did for my learning process was that I started reading the contents of the paper out aloud under my breath so that I don't disturb the others, while actually dragging the cursor over the screen to highlight the text that I was reading as I went along. Now, that way, my hands helped my eyes focus on a particular area of the page, while my speech was getting fed back to me as an audible input, as if someone is reading to me. Now, this maximized my sensory involvement as much as I could probably manage to do. And what happened because of this? Well, it allowed me to improve focus and retain information for much, much longer without tiring out. But you see, this in itself is not sufficient. Why? Because the amount of work done is humongous. So I needed another step in the right direction. And here I figured step 2. Step 2 is I, identification. You need to figure out the 3 most important points to focus on in a given page, paragraph, or section of information. Remember, the key is just 3 important points. Now, what that does is it doesn't overload you with needless issues and keeps your brain tricked into feeling that the content is easy enough to master quickly because there really isn't too much to know. So what I started doing was I started breaking down every section of a paper into 3 most important points that I could identify based on now what I was reading more efficiently. And believe me, within a matter of trying my hand at this strategy over a couple of papers, I was not only becoming great at finding out what I needed to focus on, it was happening really quickly. This, of course, is aided a little by prior knowledge of the background that I was looking for, but then that's something that we all generally have anyway. And even if we don't, the first few pages, which are usually the slowest to read up, drop a great deal of hints. Now, some of you may ask, what if there are more than 3 important points? That's very possible, yes? Here's the trick in that case. The moment you figure out the 3 most important points, while you're scanning the remaining text, your brain will automatically help you find patterns that it feels will justify what you've chosen to focus on. For example, try reading what's coming on your screen now. If you've read correctly, the text will read, this text is jumbled quite substantially and still makes sense. This is the power of the brain that you can leverage to make sense of even jumbled lettering. It is this very power that you will automatically hone in the process of identification without actually taxing your brain. You're literally tricking your brain to helping you connect stuff without reading or focusing too much on it explicitly. And this automatically led me to the 3rd step of the process, M, making sense of the 3 most important points that you zeroed in on. Practically, as you master the arts of step 1 and 2, 3 in fact starts happening quite in parallel. As I was reading, my brain was connecting the dots in much the same manner as yours did in the sentence I just showed you a couple of minutes ago. It automatically started imputing meaning to the information based on the context, which I was now just quickly skimming over. And now you see, suddenly there's a sense of clarity that starts coming in from stuff that you actually didn't know and stuff that you haven't particularly even worked on focusing on. This is what amazed me a lot. In no time now, I was actually reading much faster, engaging with the content much sharper, and analyzing the information much clearer and better than what I was ever doing before. And all this happened in just 3 sim steps. I haven't even reached the PLE part yet. So yes, the making sense of stuff part becomes much quicker and much easier if you're automatically great at sensory involvement and identification a few pages down, and making sense becomes very, very easy because now the brain also has context to connect the information to. Now, this was going wonderfully well for me personally until I hit an unexpected roadblock sometime during my teaching journey. The thing is, I didn't realize that there are a few more things I was unconsciously doing till my students needed me to help them do better. And that's where it hit me. Step number 4, P, personalizing, is a vital cog in the entire process that most people don't really understand too well. Now, what is personalizing? I'm sure many of you here are fans of Sherlock, who've probably no doubt heard of the words memory palace, yes? So while I can't see you do it, let me still ask you to raise your hand in case you've heard about this. I'm sure right now you've probably raised your hand. So what exactly does the memory palace or any similar technique achieve? The answer is as simple as it gets. It helps you to convert data to a form that you can easily connect with and hence visualize when you want and where you want. Now, some of us love images while many others would probably love songs. I personally know a lot of students who've learned the entire periodic table with one song, which is a remarkable feat of personalizing learning. The trick is fairly simple. No matter what you want to learn quickly, after you've reached the sim stage, you now convert these pieces of information into a format that you can best relate to, be it an image, a song, a mnemonic, a crazy word, or even a movie scene. You'd be amazed how it helps to help you get quickly retaining content very, very fast. Now, picture this. Imagine a boy and a girl who've never met, but whose parents want them to get married to each other. Obviously, they've got two choices. One is resist meeting each other, never get to know each other, and therefore, when they get married, there are going to be hiccups along the way. Obviously, not the fastest of processes. The other is they meet each other in a nice coffee shop, sit down without moving around too much, get to know each other comfortably, smooth out the issues, and of course, that will lead to a much more comfortable, much more better marriage in the long run, right? Now, if you replace the boy and the girl with chemicals, and if you replace the coffee shop with a catalyst providing a surface area for them to sit around and combine, you've just understood the mechanism of how a physical catalyst action happens to speed up a chemical reaction. Now, that was fairly simple, wasn't it? And this is what I did to personalize things for myself and in turn, my students. It works even today. Now, many people ask me, can you do this with all subjects? The answer is yes, of course. In mathematics, whenever I'm struggling with formulae, what I tend to do is I group similar formulae into bunches of 2 and 3 and create a correlation between these formulae. Now, that way, even if I forget one of the formulae, the other formulae help me to remember what I'm forgetting. Now, let me give you an example. We know that sine of 3 theta is 3 sine theta minus 4 sine cube theta, yes? Now, what I do in my head is I think of it this way. I think of sine and cos as somewhat opposites of each other. So if I replace a sine with a cos, what I do is I replace every plus with a minus and vice versa. Now, suddenly, that leads me to the easy way of remembering the formula for cos 3 theta, which is 4 cos cube theta minus 3 cos theta. You see, this may seem like an easy example to work with, but the point is that the same general principles can be used on many other formulae, right? You can easily choose to replace the sine with the cos, the plus with the minus, and that opens up a bunch of possibilities which will help you to remember a lot of different formulae very, very easily. Now, that wasn't too hard to figure out with this trick, was it? This is the beauty of personalizing. Many people would probably now feel that that's the end of the trick. You don't really need anything more to do. But actually, there are two very, very important small steps that people often skip, often neglect. Okay? The fifth step in the entire process here is L, letting go. And this is something that most people are actually unable to do once they start focusing on learning something. Ask yourself this: how many times have you gotten stuck with a particular problem and never gotten past it without wasting lots of time? If your answer is many times, I won't be surprised at all. That's just the way our brain is wired to work sometimes. We focus too hard on something and try to know everything about it without realizing that it's just fatiguing our brain and making us less productive on things that could otherwise still be managed. And here's where we need to learn to let go. Don't stick with the same content for too long. Move on. Even if you think the picture in your mind isn't fully evolved yet, or that mnemonic hasn't seeped in completely, don't worry. Don't overtax your brain. The brain shouldn't get too bogged down, or else it will stop listening to you. Just give your brain a small push and help it to move on. That way, it will help you to focus a lot better. Remember, we're trying to speed up the process of learning here, and letting go allows you to learn most of what you need to on a faster timeline. Finally, we reach the sixth and final step that clinches the deal completely. E, evaluate yourself at short intervals. Remember, I told you not to stick to learning that one bit of information for too long? But that doesn't mean that you don't come back to it. By all means, this is perhaps the most underestimated step. Now, keep revisiting what you've committed to your memory periodically to check how well you've learned. For you, that period can be an hour, a day, or a week. But the key is to keep on fleetingly coming back. Remember, don't stick to it, just revisit it and evaluate how well you know what you know. Make this your feedback mechanism. This will help you build a long-term memory and also allow you to understand what kind of information sticks longer and better for you. And that will help you make the slight tweaks in the learning process that will help you overcome any small drawbacks that you may face along the way. Well, it really is that simple to learn anything super quick. All you need now is a little effort to put these 6 steps into practice, and I'm hoping that after today, each one of you embarks on your own remarkable, simple, super quick learning journeys. Thank you.
Wow, a big hand of applause for Mr. Tejas Shyam. Yeah. Now I'm just happy, and that is not an acronym. I'm really glad to know that there are ways to sharpen our minds, and it's so simple if we follow a systematic approach with a little bit of focused effort. I mean, before this session at least, I can say that I've gone through countless YouTube videos to find that all in one solution. But now I have a sense of relief to know that there is no substitute for smart work, like personalization, identification, evaluation, and one very important fact that is often overlooked by most of us, and that is of the letter L. No, not loser, but letting loose. In that sense, trust our minds to withhold that information and retain that information in times when we need it to. So, thank you, Mr. Tejas, for introducing your methodology to us today.
And our next speaker has a very outgoing personality, what I wish I really had. Ria Sharma, a LGBTQIA+ youth activist and the co-founder of Jimmy Foundation, working towards always creating awareness and about issues of gender and sexuality at various platforms through workshops, advertisements, and short films. A trained speaker for the Plain Jar, having done videos with the Hindustan Times, the Quint on LGBT matters, and on the panel with Faye D'Souza for the Urban Debate. Ria has always used this platform to voice our opinions about the openness of our society. They have found themselves and now aspire to help countless others that do not have a voice for themselves or just don't know how to start this journey of self-realization. Apart from that, Ria has also given a Josh talk in Hindi, which went trending on number 9 a few weeks back. Ria's first break into the storytelling community was with stories like Split End and A Girl with a Beard. Wow, that's a lot. For a person of my age, these achievements are just the tip of the iceberg. And I'm sure Ria will go on to reach further heights, inspiring many fellow Indians. I now welcome Ria Sharma.
At around the age of 10, 12, I realized that I couldn't fit into any box of identity that the society had made for me. As time passed by, I was conditioned more and more into believing that I was wrong and did not deserve to live a dignified life. I felt suffocated to form a false illusion of my identity just to get validated by the society, to pretend to be what I was not, until one decision changed my life. Hi, I'm MX Ria Sharma, and I do not hesitate to say that I'm lesbian and gender fluid. Although there was a time in my life where I would literally shiver at the thought of telling this to anybody, even to myself. Why? Why was it so hard for me to accept what I was? Why is it still hard for some people to agree that humans like me exist? conditioning. Conditioning has the magnificent power to affect every human's mindset on this world. While we might be negatively conditioned literally every day of our life, we still choose to be blind puppets to it. But what exactly is this? How exactly does conditioning work? We are constantly learning and gaining new knowledge in our life to achieve our dreams and to also bring about a change in the society. While conditioning also involves learning about new concepts, sometimes it can become a parasite that stops you from adapting to new knowledge and proceed. After a point of time, we become constant and stagnant with a way of thinking and eventually become unreasonable and outdated. We are conditioned in religion, gender, caste, sexuality, how one has to behave, what is proper, what is not, what is appropriate. After a point of time, we need to decondition ourselves, delve into it, and realize that we are merely following what was said to us and paving way for more injustice. For example, when a baby is born, we tend to assign the color blue to boys and pink to girls. But does it mean that the child has to hate the color of the other gender? Does it mean that if a boy grows up to like the color pink, he's less of a man? No, not at all. Now, let's discuss about something that we all must have witnessed, but perhaps chose to not talk about it, bother about it. Do you remember the first time you met a hijra person and you felt intimidated just by their looks? Do you remember that one guy who was a little feminine and the girl who was a little masculine was bullied in the class and no one said nothing? You remember that one character in a movie who was a little feminine, who wore floral clothes, and it felt absolutely okay to humiliate them? We all witnessed this. We witnessed the pain and injustice, but chose to not talk about it. Because we weren't supposed to, right? We were taught that these people were wrong, dirty, by media, by films. In fact, the stories by our own relatives, parents. The LGBT community is one of the most tabooed communities in our country. From the society's hostile and violent behavior towards us, to the basic fundamental rights that we don't have, every day is a fight. A fight against the society which constantly targets the identity of people who are different. Another way of forming notions about a certain community is to not talk about it enough. People are unaware, ignorant. They don't know what's right, what's wrong. And they feel that it's insignificant to them. Section 377 was struck down in 2018 and lives have changed, just legally. We are not criminals anymore, but how our lives would be is not guaranteed. People are still hostile, even violent towards the members of the community. They are unaware, they have certain myths, and they are even violent sometimes. So what do we do? How do we become good allies to the community? By breaking down all the notions, stereotypes, myths that we have formed of the community over the period of time, and putting an effort to making ourselves and people around us aware about what's true and what's wrong. So let's start with discussing something and educate ourselves. The LGBT community stay in the closet, suffocated, isolated, uncomfortable because they do not have the freedom to express themselves openly. Myths like it is a phase, it's a disease, and it's treatable. It's so prevalent in our country that some of us believe it true and try to get it treated. Conversion therapies. Therapies that claim to treat someone's identity by supernatural energies or even painful shocks. Corrective rape. Getting a homosexual woman raped because someone thinks that they haven't experienced it. And many other forms of violence is used by people to treat someone's identity. Some of you are lefties. Some of you are righties. Some of you are dark by complexion, some fair, some somewhere in the between. Some have a sixth finger in the hand. Similarly, some are gay, some are straight, and others can belong anywhere in the spectrum. We need to realize that these are just variations that do not need to be corrected. Being gay, being straight, being bisexual, being trans, being non-binary is as innate and normal to a person as being lefty or righty. These do not need to be corrected because they're absolutely, innately correct. Another myth that we break here is that gender is same as sex. Now that is a huge myth. Sex is not same as gender and they cannot be used interchangeably. Sex is what you're biologically born as, what you're assigned at birth. But gender is what you feel about yourself, which you identify and understand over a period of time. I was assigned female at birth, but I realized that I was gender fluid. Now, both gender or sex is not binaries. There are not just two sexes in the world, and gender is actually a spectrum. Prefixes or pronouns are not binary too. I am MX Ria Sharma, and MX is a gender-neutral prefix. My pronouns are they and them, and not she or he. But why do we need to understand all this? It's so complicated. Because this is the first step towards inclusivity, a first step towards creating a safe space for people who identify differently. One more argument that we get a lot of times in our country is that it has come from the West. It's a modern phenomenon. Have we forgotten the beautiful past of our country? Have we forgotten the beautiful scripts, the epics, the histories that our country has produced? There were different identities, diversity of identities, which were accepted and embraced. For example, the beautiful feminine avatars of male gods, the beautiful story of Aravan and Krishna, where Krishna converts into a female for Aravan, and the beautiful life story of Shikhandi. Every religion propagated the idea of love and respect. It was us who created stereotypes, phobias, hate. So I get all of this. I understand all of this. But I have one question. When do we start to teach the next generation, the kids, about such concepts? Well, let's start to teach them basic love and empathy. Let's teach them that no matter how their friend expresses themselves, they are to be respected and considered one among them. Let's teach them that love is beautiful and hate is destructive. Well, I think that children are better off than us. They originally do not differentiate their friends. They differentiate others on the basis of how the other person behaves to them, and not on the basis of what the other person's religion is, how the person looks. So perhaps we need to decondition ourselves and get to the basics of love and respect. One decision that changed my life, as I told you in the beginning, was to not think about what the society would think of me, how the society would treat me, and stand strong and have a voice for my community. Well, I always say that I am very fortunate and privileged. My family and friends have accepted me and my identity. I remember that when my parents accepted me and my sexuality, I knew that they will always be with me as a support and as a shield. One more person that transformed my life was my partner. Like any heterosexual relationships, we have had our lovely ups and extreme downs. But no matter what happened, We stood by each other at every step. But no matter how much I love her, no matter how committed and devoted we are towards each other, we won't be able to experience some beautiful, special moments of our life. Marriage, children. I want to ask you something. Do you really think that love should have any conditions? I don't think so. So let's understand the true meaning of love and respect. Let's not get caught amidst the war of different religions, sex, sexuality, or speciesism. We are moving towards a better society where respect prevails, but it won't be possible if each one of us do not stand strong and become allies for each other. Humanity is the key. A human is nothing without humanity and everything being himself and being kind. Thank you.
Wow. A round of applause for Ria Sharma. Yes. Thank you, Ria, for that insightful talk. And as you said, conditioning has a major hold over our behavior. It sort of alienates us, closes us off from meeting new people and knowing that such people do exist. Our elders' opinions, our movie choices have sort of appropriated certain things. And it's not always right to make a judgment of, let's say, word of mouth or pop culture, right? Instead of treating it as a problem right away, we need to understand that it is not a phase, but an identity not given its due importance, its recognition. And a beautiful mention of children, I must say. It was about the purity of the children's mindset, and rightly so. We need to adopt this mindset for ourselves and be true to ourselves. So I hope for the best for all people and that we become a more welcoming society for many more years to come.
Okay, now before we move forward, we want to see all of your lovely faces. So why don't all of you all turn on your cameras and on a count of three, give us a big smile and make this X symbol symbolizing TEDx and as a tribute to Black Panther because Wakanda forever. Okay, I'm just gonna, great, I can see a lot of you all starting your cameras. Ah, thank you. Don't be shy, you'll all look amazing. Okay, so 3, 2, 1. Oh, this looks so good. Thank you so much. And what is an evening without music, am I right? So calling upon Radiance to take us to another realm by their music.
कैफियत पूछो कभी तो कैफियत पूछो तुम्हारे बिन दीवाने का क्या हाल है दिल मेरा देखो ना मेरी हैसियत पूछो तेरे बिन एक दिन जैसे 100 साल है अंजाम है तेरा होना तुम्हें मेरा जितनी भी हो दूरियां फिलहाल है मेरी रूह का परिंदा फड़फड़ाए, लेकिन सुकून का जजीरा मिल न पाए। बेकी करा, बेकी करा, एक बार को तजल्ली तो दिखा दे, झूठी सही मगर तसल्ली तो दिला दे। बेकी करा, बेकी करा, राजन दे यार बुलया, सुन ले पुकार बुलया, तू ही तो यार बुलया, मुर्शिद मेरा तेरा मुकाम कमले, सरहद के पार बुलया, परवरदिगार बुलया, हाफिज तेरा।
When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid. No, I won't be afraid. Just as long as you stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Stand by me. Don't you dare look back, just keep your eyes on me. I said you're holding back. She said shut up and dance with me. This moment is my destiny. She said ooh, ooh, shut up and dance with me. We were written soft tonight. The chemical, physical, kryptonite. Love was to the place and the fading lights. Oh, we were bound to get together, bound to get together. She took my arm. I don't know how it happened. We took the floor and she said, no, don't you dare look back. Just keep your eyes on me. I said you're holding back. She said shut up and dance with me. This woman is my destiny. She said ooh, ooh, shut up and dance with me.
Get out of the pouring rain, going down like an Armageddon flame. A shame the ones who die without a name. Hear the dogs hauling out of key to a hymn called faith and misery. I plead the company lost the war today. I beg to dream and differ from the hollow light. This is the dawning of the rest of our lives on holiday. The headline say the world is over. Whatever happened to a fairy tale ending? You can't pass if you don't know the code word. I'm inside of you, a falling. I'm in a room by the door with a space and waiter. I know that I'm immature, but at least I'm not a goddamn failure. SOS, I'm calling. SOS, I'm calling up. SOS, I'm falling. SOS, I'm falling now. Upside down, upside down, upside down. My life is a roller coaster, roller coaster. Getting off this roller coaster.
They say, oh my God, I see the way you shine. Take your hands, my dear, and place them both in mine. You know you stopped me dead while I was passing by. And now I'm there to see you dance just one more time. Ooh, I see you every time. And all my life, I like your style. Ooh, you make me wanna cry. And now I'd like to see you dance just one more time. Say, dance for me, dance for me, dance for me, oh, oh. I've never seen anybody do the things you do before. Let's say, move for me, move for me, move for me, hey, hey. And when you're down, I'll make you do it all again.
Wow. We weren't ready for that performance to blow us away like that. So thank you so much, guys. And now, a question for all of you again. This is a very good one. Why did you decide to join this event today? Now, here back on me, on my engineer stuff, for me, it was about getting to know the different experiences of all these esteemed speakers and getting to know their ideas. What about you, Dedesia?
For me, it was definitely to get more ideas for my future TED Talk, which, by the way, Mervin, I have every day at 8 p.m. in my room, so you can book your tickets for that. Everyone, whoever was peer pressurized, I think you should be happy because you pushed for something good today. Okay, now we hear you all have put up plenty of burning questions for our speakers to answer, and we cannot wait any longer. So, handing over the virtual stage to our moderator for today, Chelsea D'Souza.
Thank you, Delicia. Thank you so much. Well, I'm sure you all are going to agree with me when I say that this is the most exciting and the most awaited part of the entire event, the Q&A session, where you and me get to interact with our spectacular speakers, MX Ria Sharma, Dr. Raj Shekhawat, and Mr. Tejas Shyam. And I'm so glad, I'm so grateful to have them with us right now. And I can already see them all excited and all happy to be here and for the Q&A session. So hi, how are you all doing? How are you liking the event so far?
Should I go first?
Yes,
Please
sure.
go.
Okay, now I absolutely love the bands, by the way. They were fabulous. I mean, if I was not a speaker, I would probably get up and start dancing, basically. It was so
Wow.
bloody good. And also, I think it has been an absolute privilege to be associated with TEDxSFIT. From the past 2.5 months, I have been in touch with a lot of people in the organizing team. And those people who don't know this, I must reiterate this, that everybody on the organizing team, they are students. They are full-time students. They have their lectures, their assessments, their exams, their college life. On top of that, you guys have put this brilliant show together. So kudos to you. And I'm also very, very grateful. Let's give a huge round of applause to everybody, the organizing team. And also, I think in the audience today, we had people from everywhere around the world. I've seen people from New Zealand, Australia, Canada, US, England. So different time zone, a lot of people from India as well. Saturday could be a day where you just want to relax, but people chose to come here. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And just a second, I would also like to introduce everybody to my little son, George Yashraj.
Hi.
Hi, Georgie. Say hello,
Wow,
George.
it's so lovely to see him, little George.
So because he was mentioned in the talk, I thought it'll only be worth that he comes here and he says hello to everybody. He's just turning 2 months, day after tomorrow.
Oh my God.
Thank you, Georgie. Say bye-bye to everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Dr. Raj. You've also been our support system. Thank you. And Ria, what about you? How are you liking the event so far?
Oh my God, Chelsea, I told you earlier that this is a dream and I was I was honored and really shocked to see the panel. It was an honor to share the panel with Raj and Tejas. And, it was a dream come true. Everybody dreams of giving a TED Talk one day. And TEDxSFIT gave me that opportunity. And this is a dream come true. That's it.
Oh my God, we are also so grateful to have you. And Mr. Tejas, how are you liking it?
The event has been fantastic. So I've actually been with the event last week as well as this week, and the panel that we have, Dr. Raj, MX Ria, it's been a privilege to be part of the panel. It's been extremely entertaining today. So I've actually loved the band performances. I was hoping that probably I got back to my college days when I used to play in a band. I was hoping maybe I can go live sometime. It's been wonderful, and seeing the young man, Mr. George, out there. I call him a young man, but he's a tiny tot. I use that word a lot. It was so fantastic, the cherry on the cake. I'm absolutely honored and privileged to be here. A huge shout out to the entire TEDxSFIT team. You guys have done a brilliant job, and thanks a lot.
We are so happy to know that you all are happy. So on this note, should we begin with the Q&A session? Are we all set?
Yes.
Yes. So the first question, oh God, we have a lot of questions here. Let me tell you all this. And we'll try to answer all of them. So the first question is to Dr. Raj. It is, when did you first start to develop an inclination towards audiology?
Chelsea, thank you so much for that question. That probably takes me back to my high school days. I very clearly remember my biology teacher. He invited one of his ex-students who was studying audiology and speech pathology to give a lecture to us during lunchtime. And initially, we all felt so irritated and annoyed. We are like, this is our lunchtime. We get just 1 hour of lunchtime. We want to play. And why we all are forced to sit in this lecture hall to listen to somebody? But turns out those 30 minutes literally changed my life. I got so passionate about audiology straight away. I got hooked into it. And there are so many advantages of being in this profession of audiology. It gives you so much of flexibility. And the best thing is the reward it gives you to make a difference in people's life. You can work in private practice, clinics, hospitals, you can do research, you can be in academia, you can work in hospital. There's so much of flexibility as well. Audiologists are in demand globally. So there are so many advantages of being in this discipline. And I'm still very grateful to my high school biology teacher for introducing me to audiology.
We are so grateful that you are inclined towards audiology. That is the very reason you are here giving such an amazing talk on this topic. So yes, thank you, Professor Raj. Now, the next question is to Mr. Tejas Shyam. The method seems very effective in terms of academia, but what changes would you make for it to be applied to other things like learning instruments or any other sport?
Okay, so the thing is, any template that you talk about, any learning methodology is never going to be a one size fits all. And that's what I've also mentioned in the talk. You see, when something comes down to personalizing, when you try and personalize stuff for yourself, right, you've got to actually take it based on what kind of field you're in. Now, for someone who's learning music, the entire aspect of personalization may be very different, right? When you're looking at trying to identify things that you want to resonate with, again, when you're talking about learning an instrument is very different. You don't have that much theory all the time, right? Learning academics is very, very different. So you've got to make those subtle tweaks in terms of being able to identify very, very effectively what's your key areas. So like I say, when you want to tweak the model, you've got to first customize it to your original setting. What I've given today is a generic template which everyone can use. And most importantly, what this template does is it gives everyone the flexibility of filling in the blanks the way they like, right? These are, like I said, just 6 very simple steps. Each one of us at some point has thought about them. The only problem is we don't actually put them together chronologically, especially the part about letting go. That's something I resonate very strongly with because we've all struggled there, right? That's where one has to actually try and change the way they actually use the model depending on which field they're in. Now, if I was probably trying to learn music, For me, if I wanted to personalize my learning, I would be more of an auditory learner in that sense. And that's, Dr. Raj's department. So I'm happy to have him here. He can probably add more perspective, as the talk goes on. But yes, so it depends upon which kind of field you are in and what you want to do.
Yes. Thank you. So, Dr. Raj, you want to add something?
Just a very quick thing. I absolutely agree with what Tejas has said. What happens is we call this multimodal learning. So our brain retains information much better when we stimulate the brain simultaneously through various modalities. For example, hearing, speaking, touching. So when I used to remember things for my exam, I would read them out loud and I'll also simultaneously write them. So I'm using tactile, I'm speaking, I'm listening to that whole thing. It sort of creates a much, much better impact. And another example of that could potentially be the fact that if we are watching a movie, and if you're watching a movie purely with no sound, just vision, that's option 1. Option 2, watching the movie with no visual, just hearing. And option 3, putting them all together. That's when the real impact happens. And that's when the various areas in the brain lights up. And that's why it's extremely important to include multimodality in no matter what we do.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm sure everything that you all have said, we are going to put it into practice. Thank you. Now, our next question is to MX Ria. Where do you think we can trace the origins of these antiquated gender roles that are so dominant in society today?
Yeah. So I think that, gender roles have always been there since humans have existed. Initially, it was a way to, distribute work. The assigned male at birth would go outside and do all the physically hardcore work. The assigned female at birth would be at home and, saving the grain, saving the food, taking care of the babies, nurturing the babies, right? So initially it was not a problem because at the end of the day, you need to exist. But when we started progressing, modernizing, and we politicized these roles, we assumed that, going outside is more superior than, staying at home and nurturing kids. That was the time that it became problematic. So at the end of the day, we need to realize that these roles are just to exist and to survive, no matter who does it. At the end of the day, every job is equal, and every gender role is as important as the other gender role. So I feel that it always existed, but today we need to understand, go back to the basic and understand that all of them are equal, all of them are important.
Absolutely agree. Quality is all that we need. Now we have a very interesting question, and that is to Dr. Raj. Now, when we talk about noise, somewhere we are not aware about noise pollution and laws related to that. It's still taught here in India. So what can we do to deal with public noise sources?
Now, that's a very difficult question, I must say. And I think I would probably start answering it with respect to the countries where I have spent more time recently. For example, in England and in New Zealand, after certain time in the evening, it's not allowed for you to play loud music or have a party. And if somebody's doing that, you could call the noise control people, and they will come and they will make sure they will shut it down. So those sort of rules and regulations do exist. I'm personally not aware about some of those rules and regulations in India, but I think if we create the awareness, one is trying to enforce a law, and the second thing is bottom-up approach. When we create this awareness that, look, your hearing is precious, and if you damage it once, as I said, there are millions of people under the age of 19 who have developed permanent hearing loss because of noise exposure. Our hearing is gone forever and nothing can be done to bring it back. And if we think from that perspective, it probably puts a lot of personal responsibility on people. And that way it could probably make a little bit of more difference as well, I think.
Yes, thank you.
I want to add something here.
Sure.
Okay,
Yes.
so the one thing I've noticed, because I deal a lot with the youngsters who Dr. Raj was actually talking about. So this is a message out to everyone, right? It's a shout out. When we are in college, we go to all of these concerts and we like blaring music. They say 50,000 watts of pulsating sound, and that seems exciting to you, right? You feel, oh my God, so much sound, such wonderful sound. And you try and stand just next to the speakers and you're like, wow, I can hear it. I mean, to all of you out there, remember, you can hear the sound a few feet back as well. You just don't need to be in front of the speakers. And remember, it's not cool to play blaring music in your cars and making other people listen to it, right? Listen to music for yourself. It's not cool to go out in the middle of the night, play loud music in hope that the entire neighborhood wakes up to your raunchy Bollywood or, peppy Bollywood or Hollywood numbers. Please avoid that. That's one definite way we can actually drive some amount of change. The youngsters today can probably push it forward to the next generation tomorrow.
I'm sure we are going to remember everything that you all have said when we listen to loud music henceforth. Now, the next question is to you, Mr. Tejas. It is, kindly share your views on importance of unlearning and contextual approach for effective learning.
Okay, so when it comes to unlearning and contextual approach for effective learning, first of all the learning that we have, okay, remember, I am somebody who believes that learning shouldn't be completely compartmentalized. Okay, the reason being, knowledge as a whole is never really fragmented in general. We have this misconception with us that we need to study biology in isolation, we need to study physics in isolation, we need to study chemistry in isolation. Knowledge is always in motion. You actually transfer from one domain to the other. A lot of what we do in physics, sound as a chapter, is related to what Dr. Raj does in biology, right? Practically, when we use the word contextual learning, what I am getting from the question is, you want to understand how to put things into clear perspective and why you need to unlearn and relearn things. Now, first things first, I'm not really a proponent of the entire idea of getting kids to unlearn and relearn. I personally do not follow that methodology with the students I teach. The reason being, it becomes extremely difficult to get people to change their ideas once you actually seed them in. So what I tell my students is, I say, hey, look, you're asking me the right questions. I'm going to give you an answer. The answer today might make a little sense. Tomorrow, when you learn a lot more, I'm going to tell you the higher levels of truth, but I'm not going to lie to you about something that doesn't exist. Now, unfortunately, what we are part of in our school education systems, by and large, is a very fragmented form of learning. I mean, ask any 7th, 8th, 9th grader, the first thing they'll tell you is a chapter like percentage was taught in 7th grade, 8th grade, and 9th grade with barely any tweaks here and there. And more importantly, when a child goes to 11th and 12th, simple topics actually completely change over. You realize what you've been learning up to your 10th grade has not really been accurate, right? So I, as a person, personally believe when you learn it the first time, try and learn it right, because what you learn eventually is going to become a habit for you. So yes, it is important to put things into context, because that's where personalizing comes in, right? Whatever context you have, that context is going to allow you to understand how to grasp things. Now, for example, if I'm reading a history lesson on the freedom struggle, I have to have a background of what it was like when the freedom struggle actually started. So that context is important. But what I'm not going to do is, I'm not going to box myself in and say, hey, look, it's only limited to this one page of information. I have to actually go out there and, in that sense, rather broaden the context rather than keeping the context too narrow and trying to draw inferences. Remember, it's always a trade-off between being too broad and too narrow. You've got to sort of find that sweet spot. And that's where the role of a good teacher comes in, because most of the times a good teacher is the one who will give you that perspective and say, hey, look, you know what? You're thinking in the right direction. Or maybe, change your thinking, tweak it this way, you can think a little better. And that's where, a teacher becomes very essential to the entire the concept of contextual learning and unlearning. I think at the end of the day, what I would probably think of is, I'd say, go contextual, but think a lot broader, not narrower.
Thank you so much for enlightening us. Thank you. Now, our next question is to MX Ria. And the question is, first of all, she has said outstanding, felt every word of what you said. And now the question is, what is your advice to a child who opens up to his family but finds no support?
That's a very serious question, and I've witnessed that in the community. I've been working in the community since 4 years, and since I came out to my parents, and till today. And this is a very very important question, because a lot of children don't find support from their parents. To be very honest, in every talk that I give, I mentioned that I have a very privileged background. My parents accepted me, and they were aware about LGBT beforehand. So my advice to a child would be to first, before you come out, know that your parents will definitely take time to understand that. Don't expect that they will accept you the very moment you come out. Because if you took time to understand yourself, they will take more time to understand you and the entire community. I took around 10 years to understand myself. And if I expect that my parents, who belong from a different generation, added years of conditioning to understand me the very moment, it would be wrong on my part. So first of all, understand that they will take time. The second advice would be to make them understand, sit with them, teach them what you know, and expose them to different resources that are available. When I was coming out to my parents, before that, I showed my mama some some pictures of LGBT couples, LGBT parents. I exposed them to an organization which is Svikar in India and global, who is basically a collective of parents who have accepted their queer children. I exposed them to them, and I also told them how in Hinduism, there are different instances of LGBT, there are different instances of being transgender fluid, because I thought that perhaps that would help them to understand. So, make your parents understand in a way that, it's easier for them to understand. So if your parents are religious, help them in that way. Educate yourself first, and then help them to understand it. And after that, give them time to understand the entire community. I expected my parents to understand me the very moment I come out. And they were absolutely supportive. But the second time that I came out to them as gender fluid, it was definitely hard for them, because for around 16 years, they thought that I was a woman. They had their own ideas of me being a girl. And so I gave them time to understand it. I told them how gender and sex works. It's not the same, and it's absolutely normal. So yeah, my advice would be to reach out to people who are like you, understand yourself, understand the entire community, and then give time to your parents to understand you. Yeah, Professor Sharaj.
Yes.
Can I just quickly add to
Yes,
what
yes.
the MX Ria said? Ria, first of all, your talk was so inspirational. I mean, I'm just absolutely blown away. You are such a lovely, lovely person. And I think sometimes there are a lot of cultural hindrances as well. So it can be very, very difficult personal journey for people, very difficult. And on top of that, the families not understanding it that well makes it even more complicated, and then society in a lot of circles. What we have in the universities where I have worked overseas, we have big day outs, we have LGBT community groups. So we celebrate rainbow communities, and there are proper weeks where we do these massive celebrations, where we have got even LGBTQ ally staffs, where you have networkings and meetings. For example, next month, I'm starting a new position at Flinders University in Australia. And they asked me that, why don't you write few things about you, which will probably be distributed to the whole community there. And one of the things which I wrote was that I'm a very strong LGBTQ ally. So I think it's extremely, extremely important. When I go for giving lectures, sometimes I love to wear a rainbow badge, that sort of gives a message to people that, it's absolutely okay for being who you are. You don't have to be ashamed of that. You are as much of a human as anybody else. You can achieve as much as anybody else. So thank you, Ria, for raising that wonderful topic and giving that brilliant speech today.
Thank you. So,
Thank you so
Chelsea,
much. Yes.
I wanted to add a little thing. Professor Raj, these small steps of support really matter a lot. And I really appreciate that what you have been doing. And I remember that, when I came out and my friends were very supportive to me, they put their gender pronouns in their Instagram bios, in their signature section of their emails, because I didn't identify as he or she, and I felt left out for around 15 years of my life. I struggled through my identity. But then that was the time when I realized that, there are people who are supportive, and, just these small steps of inclusivity, really including yourself, educating yourself about pronouns, about how to use the right pronouns in our daily conversations really matter a lot. And, I think that each one of us can do small steps to support each other. It's not just about educating communities. There are so many communities out there. Let's support each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that answer. Now, moving on, our next question is to Dr. Raj. And the question is, thank you, sir, for explaining to us the science behind hearing, but how do we appreciate and deal with people who are not gifted with the ability to perceive sound?
Now, so the focus of my today's talk was basically on acquired hearing loss, means people who have normal hearing. And there's this research shows that noise-induced hearing loss is the second largest cause for acquired hearing loss. And the first one is aging. We can't do anything about aging, right? As we age, the hearing does deteriorate. But your noise-induced hearing loss is 100% preventable. So that was the focus of my today's talk. Now, coming back to the question, let's say the kids who are born with hearing loss, right? It's extremely, extremely, extremely important to have newborn hearing screening globally everywhere. And I feel really sad that there are only parts of the world where we have that as mandatory thing, and there are a lot of places where it doesn't even exist. For example, all my kids, when they were born, two of my daughters born in New Zealand, my son born in London, the very first day they were born, they underwent newborn hearing screening. And then there are provisions. After 3 years, you have a preschool hearing check. Then you have a hearing check before you go to school. And there are various signs and symptoms. When the kids are usually between 3 to 5 years of age, a lot of them develop hearing infections, middle ear infections, and that can actually, research shows, that can have a major impact on their learning as well. So it's extremely important to have some of these provisions in place in terms of the health policies. But what can we do as parents and as local people from bottom up? And that could be being more aware. There are various signs and symptoms we can keep. When a kid is born, after a few weeks or few days time, when you talk, when you create a sound, you see whether they startle or not, you see whether they're trying to identify or not. These are signs and symptoms. You are spending time with your child and all of a sudden you notice that they want the volume of the TV to be raised, or you are calling them few times from the kitchen, they're not responding. Some of these signs, if they're having a ear discharge, these sort of signs and symptoms, as a parent or as the generation, if we are more aware about these things, we know we can take them to an audiologist, we can take them to an ENT. So we can do all of these things at our personal level. And then, of course, there can be things done at the policy and health national level. Right. And one day it'll be perfect if we have compulsory newborn hearing screening around the world, because that will save so much to everybody economically as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your answer. We are running short of time, but we have a lot of questions and we'll make sure we answer most of them. The next question is for Mr. Tejas. And the question is, can can young children and people with disabilities be accommodated to a learning process in this manner that you've mentioned in your talk?
Absolutely. See, learning disability, in fact, is viewed very skeptically across the globe. I mean, a lot of people don't take too kindly to acknowledging that their child has learning disability. The most important thing to understand is when someone actually has a little bit of a disadvantage, you have to actually make that extra effort to get that child up to speed. Now, what I've provided today is a simple template that anybody can actually use. And most importantly, remember, the template that I've talked about today doesn't have to be applied by the individual themselves. It can actually be applied by a bunch of people for the individual themselves as well. I mean, nothing stops you as a parent from helping your child understand personalizing a little better, work in sync with your child. Nothing stops you as a parent from helping your child identify. Nothing stops you as a parent from helping your child trying to make sense of the small things. Nothing stops you from telling the child, hey, look, it's okay, don't struggle too much. We'll come back to it a little later, right? So when we talk about people who have their own set of issues, their own drawbacks, what you need to understand is this method can actually benefit them more than anything else, because naturally they have a slightly lower ability to do things easily, right? They can't learn as well as the rest of us can. And in that situation, in fact, this kind of a learning paradigm, this kind of a method can be much, much more effective. In fact, remember this, when you actually start solving a Rubik's Cube, right? You don't solve the Rubik's Cube just because you're a genius. You go onto YouTube, you search for how to solve a Rubik's Cube, and you look at the algorithms, right? You say up, left, down, left, up, left, down, and you say, now I know how to solve this one layer, right? In the same way, when you actually want to start learning better, whether you have learning disability, whether you're a child who's not yet reached that ability to cogitate too well, whether you're aging and your memory is failing you, what I've given today is like that algorithm, which if you apply by using a little bit of your personal experiences, and that's what I said, make this method your feedback, right? Allow this method to feed you back into what works best for you. Make those tweaks in your learning process. Make those tweaks in the process for the people you're helping out. In general, this method will help all of those people who don't really have access to that kind of, privileged learning that we do, make a better learning start.
Yes, thank you so much for your guidelines. I'm sure everyone is going to take something from this for sure. Thank you so much. Now, our next question is to Ria. And the question is, how different is it to be in a relationship when one belongs to the LGBTQ community? Do people easily accept the fact that love is love?
It's a very, very beautiful question, because a lot of people think that it's very different from heterosexual relationships. I'll be very honest and I'll be very personal that my relationship has been very hard and has been very pleasant, like any heterosexual relationship. But I feel that there are some factors that are at advantage. I am dating a cis woman. So, she understands what I go through, my mood swings. She understands what I've went through for 15 years, and she appreciates that. So I feel that when you are in a homosexual relationship, that's an advantage, that you appreciate the struggles that the other person has. You are sensitive to them. Personally, my partner has been exploring their sexuality and their gender, and I'm sensitive to their journey, and I give them time and space to understand themselves and shine out quite well. Coming to the second part of the question, definitely it's very hard for people to accept that two women or two man can be in a relationship because of the conditioning that we have had. In media, when I was growing up, I didn't have any idol to look up to. So I felt that, homosexual relationships don't exist at the first place. And it was very difficult for me because I thought that I was the only person feeling a certain way. So I feel that, because of the conditioning of the representation that we have had, we have such less representation of homosexual couples. I feel it's very difficult for people to understand it. It's still very difficult. Even after Section 377 was struck down, some people don't even know that there was Section 377. They are not even aware that there was a section that criminalized people who love the people who they love. So I feel that it's definitely difficult. I've had instances where people have ragged me and my partner because we held hands in public. There are instances where people just come up to us and ask, "Arey, tum dono ladki ho, who is the boy?" You know, this can't be normal and stuff like that, you know, openly in the public. So I feel that, and I am still lucky to not have so many, you know, experiences. I know people who face this on a daily basis. So definitely it's hard for people.
I know, Ria, you are a wonderful human being, and I'm sure your relationship is going to be an inspiration to so many other relationships. So yes, thank you so much for answering. Now, our next question is to Dr. Raj. And the question is, do you think our other senses, such as seeing and speaking, are as important as hearing?
Absolutely, absolutely. Just because I'm an audiologist, that doesn't mean that I'm only all about hearing. One thing we need to remember is none of these senses work in isolation. They all work together in harmony. That's extremely important to know. But yes, there is a very tight and a close relationship between speech and hearing. A child being able to learn a language and speak, it's dependent on the hearing and the auditory feedback they get. You know, that's why if a child has profound hearing loss and no intervention is done, that child will not be able to learn to speak and learn a language unless some intervention is done, you know. So it's extremely important to remember that. Same thing goes with other sensory modalities as well. So they all work in harmony. Remember, our brain is the center point of all these perceptions. So everything needs to integrate and fit really, really well. And as I was giving you the example of watching a movie, it has to be that multimodal stimulation sensation which makes sense, you know. Imagine going to a restaurant, ordering our favorite meal, so we can see the meal, that meal looks really well, and if we can't smell it, you know, it just takes away that punch and the whole ambience out of it, isn't
True.
it?
Yes,
So
yes,
all
yes.
these sensations, they integrate really, really well in harmony. And if I link it to what Ria spoke today, I wish we live and we create a better world where everybody could be themselves, everybody could live in harmony, everybody could love each other with no judgment, with no negativity, and all acceptance. That will be just a beautiful thing we can leave this world with, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think slowly and steadily we will get there someday for sure. Our next question is to Ria. It is some schools in the US have included LGBTQ history as a part of their curriculum for primary classes. Do you think India could benefit from a similar step?
So do you remember that in school we had a topic, environmental science, and we studied it from a book, which was acquainted by cutting a tree. So you're right. We studied it, and you know, in our lives, we have ACs in our home to feel comfortable, and we know that all of us know that, you know, it's harmful to the environment, right? So just including subjects wouldn't really make a difference. Do you think that, you know, including LGBT histories would decrease ragging in school? No, it won't, unless people really know what empathy is. So rather than directly including histories of LGBT, let's start teaching children what empathy is. Let's start teaching people what listening is, what hearing is. You know, hearing attentively, processing it, and listening to people unconditionally. Let's teach them that, right? And I feel that, you know, when I was growing up, I didn't have sex ed in school. If you talk of LGBT, it's much more ahead, right? People, you know, girls still know what menstruation is because they go through it. but boys don't know what menstruation is, right? And it does not make sense because everybody needs to know that.
Absolutely.
So rather than just including subjects, I feel that let's practically teach children what empathy is, what equality is, and I think that once children are really empathetic towards their mates, their friends, I feel that definitely, I mean, eventually we can include LGBT histories and educate them in that way. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think together we all can make such a huge difference. And I think that brings us to the end. I didn't want this to end, but with a heavy heart, I have to say we've come to the end of the Q&A session. But I hope you all had a lovely time and that you'll have at least something to take back from this session. And before concluding, a very big thank you to all of you guys who sent in such great questions. Thank you. And how can I not thank our speakers? I'm so grateful to our speakers for joining us and for gracing us with their presence and for making this session, this event, this entire evening so much more special to us. I talk a lot, I can go on and on for hours, but let's not do that. So I would like to give the virtual stage back to Mervyn.
Thank you, Chelsea. Mostly, thank you for being that gateway, to give those important questions to our speakers today. It was a very good deed indeed. And now, to the people who made this event possible, I would like to thank our sponsors for today, our presenting partner, Yorkit, Learn Abroad, our gifting partner, The Soul Store, our knowledge partner, Shrek's Learning, and our associate partner, Shastrat Ventures. But that's not all, folks. The show ain't over yet. Today being just day 3, we hope to see you back next weekend, 5th September, for our last and final installment of TEDxSFIT virtual series. Time flies fast. Yeah, I know. So our speakers for next weekend are Ansab Amir and Derek Karunesudas. Now, Ansab Amir is a poet and a speaker, but most of all, he's considered a storyteller, which is why he's the head curator and community manager of the Scribble Stories, India's largest storytelling platform. He has represented India at South Asian debating, and he has many works which are in the process of publishing. His articles find places in The Wire, The Quint, The Telegraph, First Post, and The Citizen. And next up, we have Derek Karunesudas. Derek is a cybersecurity evangelist and industry leader with 13 plus years of experience in driving profitable businesses for global clients. He has worked with companies like Deloitte, NTT, RSA, and now British Telecom based in Singapore. Having a diverse work experience with cybersecurity, he understands the economies and cultures associated with it. And did I not mention, he is our very own SFIT pass out, that is, an alumni of the 2005 EXTC department.
Great. So if there's one thing I hate, it's finding a spider in my room. Ew. But if there's 2 things that I hate, is saying goodbye to such an amazing crowd. We hope you're as eager to see us next weekend as we are. Signing off, live long and prosper. See you back here next Saturday.